Obviously, the economy's been kind of pumped full of the stimulus and things. Obviously, well needed because of obviously the forced government shutdown. Obviously, there's new stimulus bills coming out, and that's added to the debt. Do you think that'll have an effect on taxes in the future as far as how to cover this temporary time where we've had to kind of pump the economy full of liquid cash to maintain liquidity?
This is one that, again, try not to get too far in the weeds on this. I'll start by saying that, one, I'm pretty fiscally conservative. I like to make sure that we aren't writing checks that we can't cash. So, conceptually, I don't like seeing massive amounts of centralized control and spending coming out of Washington, because Washington doesn't always, and sometimes not at all, doesn't always make the best decisions about how those dollars get spent, because it's not their money. It's our money. And so I think there's a lot of waste in the system, but that's not a new problem. But our country's collective ability to finance massive expenditures it's greater than any civilization that's ever been seen before. And so while I am aware of the national debt clock that's in Times Square in New York City and how much that thing is running all the time, if you look at what we owe compared to the sum total of the productive capacity and assets we have as a country, our balance sheet's pretty darn solid. It should be better. I don't like that there's so much uncontrolled spending, but we really are in a good spot. It's no different than looking at your own personal balance sheet and saying, well, gosh, I have a mortgage, and if I take out a bigger mortgage, my goodness, I'm going to go bankrupt. Well, maybe, but what if you just got a huge promotion, you're making twice as much money, and your mortgage is only 5% larger? You actually are still way ahead. Actually, your balance sheet's even better than it was before, despite the fact that you took on a little bit more debt. And I think that's the best analogy I can come up with in terms of what the United States is doing. We are adding more debt to the balance sheet right now. And will every one of those dollars go someplace productive? Obviously not. Will we look back on this and say it's a good thing we did it that way? I certainly hope so. But it's on the asset side of the balance sheet, we're still incredibly strong. And as long as we continue to be innovative, which I think we always will, as a society, I think I don't have concerns about the U.S. balance sheet. Our tax is going to have to be raised because of this. There's actually a pretty loose relationship between taxation in this country and the balance sheet of the country. Taxes are anymore almost a political thing, more so than just an economic thing to say, well, we have to raise taxes because of this. You had situations where debt has gone up and we've cut taxes at the same time. And interestingly enough, there's been some of the most productive growth times in the history of our economy. Go back to the 1980s, we added tons of debt to fight off the threat of the day, which was the nuclear arms race with Russia. We added massively to the debt, more so than we'd ever added to it before, and we cut taxes. So this idea that, well, if we are spending more, we have to raise taxes. We actually cut taxes back then. And the net effect was the economy grew like gangbusters, one of the most productive times, one of the productive decades in history of the United States. So there's just really kind of a loose relationship between the two. But sorry, I could talk for hours on this. I'll just be quiet now. I see people falling asleep on the side. So
just that your historian is coming out. For those of you who don't know, Eric's a big fan of history in the country, and there's a lot of reading on that. And he's probably one of the best minds I've ever met on preaching on that stuff. So it's good stuff.
I'm not lots of fun to hang out with, but I know stuff.
Yeah, he's really fun at parties. He gets stuck.